Orban is losing the election race miserably. A massive scandal in Hungary, a real information bombshell. In Dagestan, streams of dirty water flood the streets. Sabotage in the rear. Many losses on the front. And in Russian cities, a wave of murders by Russian soldiers returning from the front. This is how Russia lives in 2026. Nikol Pashinyan humiliated Putin. This is the news today in the studio. Yulia Court. Good evening. A new flood has occurred in Dagestan. After night rainstorms, streams of dirty water are flooding the streets. Makachkala, Derbent and Dagestanskie Ogni are underwater.
This is really horrible.
In Kaspisk, there was a mass poisoning from drinking water. The cause was a sharp decline in the sanitary situation after the flooding. E. coli was discovered in the largest water source. This could have triggered the infection. Due to the risk of an outbreak, emergency hepatitis A vaccinations have already begun in the region. The poisoning situation was worsened by the rainstorms. They led to large-scale flooding across the entire Caucasus. A railway bridge collapsed in one district, and in 132 settlements there were massive power outages. All this creates ideal conditions for the spread of infections and further deterioration of water quality. Over the last 3 years, 12.5 billion rubles were allocated for the storm drainage system in Dagestan. The situation at the front is worsening. Partisans carried out sabotage in the Sumy direction. Movement agents disabled a relay cabinet on a section that ensures train movement on the route from Bryansk. Ammunition and personnel for several units of the Russian armed forces were being transported through this railway hub. But it's not just sabotage, they are destroying their own. Russian soldiers return from the front and start killing, robbing, and raping civilians. In Russia, the number of serious crimes committed by veterans of the so-called SVO has risen sharply. Statistics prove that a real criminal epidemic is growing in the country. A real and serious criminal epidemic is rapidly growing in Russia.
About a unique course that we, together with the People's Front, developed specifically for you. This is a course for the adaptation of veterans of the special military operation.
While Russians try to create adaptation courses, soldiers are killing more and more often.
We really shouldn't close anything off from the public at all, shouldn't hide anything.
The number of murders committed by active Russian soldiers outside the combat zone grows with each year of the full-scale war.
She sits there and says, I'm going to leave him. Yeah, how can you leave him? How can you leave someone who gave his life for the country? Seryoja, if you're a hero there, am I supposed to kiss your feet while you torture me and my child? Yes, kiss my feet because I went to give... Yeah, right.
In 2025, the number of murder cases increased 1.5 times in just 1 year, and 16-fold since 2022.
I carried it literally 10 meters, laid the body down, turned around and drove off.
Journalists analyzed criminal cases submitted to 108 garrison military courts. The analysis excluded appellate and cassation instances, as well as the occupied territories of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions. The military justice bodies established there by the occupation administrations do not publish information about the cases being heard. For the study, the period from 2018 to 2025 was taken.
I point with my hand and say, let's go outside and talk there. And that's it, and immediately bang bang shooting. I even provided first aid myself.
2026 in Russia began with new crimes. Irkutsk security forces stood outside an SVO veteran's door for 6 hours while he held hostage and killed a kidnapped woman.
Going to war became a new way for him to escape responsibility for his crimes. After a few months at the front, Michurin was wounded and ended up in the hospital. He didn't want to return to his unit and went AWOL. It was during this period that he committed a new murder. One of the most brutal crimes to occur in Irkutsk in recent years.
Most often, active military personnel commit murders while intoxicated.
While we were drinking, he said that we're all Putin's SVO veterans. And that was it. I just exploded.
Warrant Officer Zhivichenko shot at 12 contract soldiers of the military unit and began firing at them with a pistol.
On the way to the destination, the warrant officer drank about 2 bottles of vodka. He got out of the car with a Makarov pistol in his hand. He began accusing the soldiers lined up to receive tasks of being unwilling to participate in the special operation. He first fired into the ground and then opened fire on his subordinates. Part of the group managed to escape, but one soldier was hit by bullets in the chest and abdomen. He died on the spot and another was wounded in the thigh.
And the guy killed by the warrant officer was hailed as a hero in his town, with people saying he died in battle. Or here, one of the occupiers, after a murder right at the front, claimed it wasn't him, but Ukrainian saboteurs.
Arkhangelski was drinking vodka with one of his fellow soldiers. A quarrel broke out between them, resulting in Arkhangelski firing a burst from an assault rifle at his drinking companion. Only 1 bullet out of 3 hit the target, but it caused a fatal wound. To hide the traces of the crime, Arkhangelski claimed that the unit was attacked by a UAF sabotage group. However, he could not prove this version and wrote a confession.
According to the data studied, military personnel killed their fellow soldiers in only 17% of cases. Much more often, SVO heroes kill friends, acquaintances, or even random civilians in regions of the Russian Federation. This soldier killed his girlfriend during an argument. He stabbed her with a knife he had on him in a forest belt.
The woman's body was found in the ground 17 meters from the highway. Forensic experts found that the soldier stabbed her 42 times. Most of the blows were to the chest area.
A medical examination concluded that the soldier has an emotionally unstable personality disorder, which is explained as a consequence of participating in combat. Besides alcohol, Russian soldiers are accused of rape and violent acts of a sexual nature. A sharp increase in the number of such cases occurred in 2025. 248 proceedings under both articles were filed in courts at once. It's terrifying that the occupiers commit such crimes in the seized territories of Ukraine as well.
The soldiers who were very drunk suddenly started shooting. We were shouting, trying to make it clear that we were on the same side, that we were civilians, peaceful residents. And then they started torturing my husband. They started shooting over his head. They started shooting at his feet. It's very hard to remember all of this. I don't know how long it lasted. I realized that if I put up any resistance now, they would just shoot me. I had to survive for my daughter's sake.
Another story, which Russian officials finally confirmed, happened in September 2025 in the city of Yenakiyev, located in the occupied part of the Donetsk region. 9-year-old Katya went out for a walk and didn't return.
Locals searched for the child for 2 days. Regional social media groups wrote about it. In the end, a 32-year-old native of Alapayevsk-Sverdlovsk region, Alexei Chumachenko, was detained. In 2021, he was convicted in a rape case. However, he was later released and took part in the SVO.
Psychopaths, rapists, and murderers hide behind their participation in Putin's SVO.
I want to say that the special military operation is proceeding in strict accordance with the schedule.
Returning from the front, the soldiers commit crimes because they feel they can get away with it. And every year there are more of them. And this is not the end yet. Russia will completely drown in blood at the hands of its own people. A massive scandal in Hungary. He leaked secret information to Lavrov and lobbied for the lifting of sanctions from the sister of a Putin oligarch. Illegal conversations between Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó and his Kremlin colleague Lavrov have been made public. And this, believe me, is a real information bombshell. A blow to the gut for Viktor Orban 2 weeks before the parliamentary elections. Investigative journalists published a phone intercept of a conversation between 2 diplomats, the foreign ministers of Hungary and Russia, who discuss how politicians from Budapest will settle the lifting of sanctions in Brussels. This might not be the first conversation on the topic. It's just too fast how Szijjártó knows the names of the relatives of Russian oligarchs.
Listen, I'm calling you at Alisher's request and he just asked me to remind you that you are handling his sister's case.
Ah, Miss Ismailova, yes, of course. The thing is, together with the Slovaks, we're submitting a proposal to the European Union to remove her from the list. We'll submit it next week, and since a new review period is starting, this issue will be included on the agenda. We'll do everything we can to get her removed from the list. It's long been no secret that the Kremlin's influence was behind Szijjártó. At the end of 2021, when Moscow was already planning the invasion of Ukraine, the Hungarian diplomat and Orban ally boasted of the Order of Friendship, which Lavrov gave him for developing bilateral relations. In March of this year, the Washington Post, citing a European official, claimed that Hungary's foreign minister unashamedly reports to Russia right during breaks between EU meetings. Zakharova accused Hungary's enemies of having a fevered imagination. Viktor Orban also didn't ignore this information on the air.
We'll certainly have to look into this, but when I heard this criticism against him, I almost died laughing.
How Viktor Orban feels now after the data leak, with his party significantly losing ground ahead of the parliamentary vote, is unknown. Siarto himself decided to go all in and stated that he has never hidden his positions.
For 4 years now I've been saying, and we've been saying, the sanctions policy has failed. It's doing more harm to the European Union than to Russia. We've also clearly stated countless times that we'll never agree to sanctions against individuals or companies vital to Hungary's energy security or for achieving peace, as well as against those for whom there's simply no sense or reason to be on the sanctions list. And we will stick to this position in the future as well.
This doesn't look like a story about Hungary being against sanctions in general. It's about specific help for a specific oligarch lobbied for by Russian Minister Lavrov, who's well known for his ties to oligarchs. Does anyone here believe that Lavrov somehow found the sanctions against Usmanov's sister unfair and decided to call and seek justice just out of the goodness of his heart without any contact with Alisher Usmanov? I think very few people would see that phone call in that way. So Sijarto's excuses, I think, are just what's called damage control. When he realizes that talking about deepfakes or falsification is pointless, no one will believe it. So he pretends nothing happened and everything's fine.
The country's top diplomat did not represent any of Hungary's national interests.
We have at our disposal very specific and highly reliable confirmation that the foreign minister who serves in Viktor Orban's government and is considered to be one of the most trusted and respected Hungarian officials, someone who is known for his loyalty and dedication to his country, who was even called at one time a possible successor to Orban as Hungary's prime minister, is quite specifically, confidently, and without any remorse working for Moscow. And not just for Moscow as some state concept, but for the interests of Russian oligarchic clans, which once again allows us to recall that the Russian state is actually an alliance of Chekists and bandits.
What Russia pays the current rulers of Hungary for aiding Moscow when causing turmoil in the European family remains an open question for investigative journalists. For now, Orban and company have begun persecuting a local media figure who is shedding light on their schemes. Whether Hungarians can throw off the yoke of 16 years of rule by Orban and his party will be known by April 12th. Preliminary poll data offers hope, but the Kremlin won't just give up the Hungary card to the European Union.
In the Belgorod region, they've started installing anti-drone corridors, structures designed to protect against drone attacks.
And we certainly hope with genuine optimism that this will be one of the highly effective means of fighting against the enemy's drones.
Such corridors are being built in the Donbass by the Ukrainian military. They consist of lines of supports with protective nets stretched across them. Similar structures were also used by the Russian military in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Now they've decided to scale this experience within Russia itself.
In just 4 years, we will replace 1,800 elevators. Drones are flying. Well, the morning in the Belgorod region has begun. I'll finish. I apologize.
At the same time, residents of the region are increasingly complaining not only about shelling, but also about notification problems. People write that sirens don't go off, or they go off late, and notifications arrive only after the attack. The situation is worsened by mobile internet outages and telegram blocks through which many used to receive warnings in advance. The operational headquarters explained the delays as a technical glitch and the communication restrictions as security measures. Thanks to Putin for that. Belgorod, it seems, already wants a change of power in the Kremlin.
Let me show you exactly how I usually eat.
I'll show you how I eat. I'll show you how I eat. I'll show you how I eat. I'll show you how I eat. Write in the comments how you are watching our channel now. Is YouTube working for you? It's very important for us to know as the Kremlin is tightening the screws. And we'd like you to know the truth, which will never be shown on federal channels in Russia. Ukraine will lead the future defense of the entire Western world. Even in the US, they already understand this. NATO's days are numbered. A new alliance will appear in its place. And Ukraine will play a leading role there. Here are the details.
The US is withdrawing its troops, this time for good. Donald Trump stated that the United States is preparing to withdraw from NATO and no longer guarantees Europe's security. The reason for such statements was the refusal of some EU countries such as Spain, France, and Italy to provide the Americans with their military bases and airspace for military operations against Tehran. Just recently, Austria also joined this coalition, However, as experts explain, no matter which Europeans were against the war in Iran, it cannot affect NATO.
If Trump, to some extent, condemns European countries for not helping him in Iran, then Iran is outside of NATO's area of responsibility. NATO's area of responsibility is Article 6 of the Washington Treaty, which clearly states that it covers the mainland countries of the European continent that are members of NATO.
However, some articles of the alliance's charter are unable to restrain the emotional American guarantor. Therefore, the entire world community today is no longer fighting for Trump's loyalty, but is looking for ways to reach his inner circle.
The question actually is to what extent his inner circle can hold him back. And everyone is now trying to influence his inner circle, the administration, and both houses of Congress.
At the same time, analysts point out that it was the US that founded the alliance, and it was created primarily in the interests of America itself.
A strategic problem for Donald Trump and the US after this statement is that the US withdrawal from NATO will primarily hit the United States. Because NATO is a network of American military bases in Europe, US political influence on European security, control over a key region of the world, including control over European security forces. If the US leaves, whose influence will automatically increase in Europe? Military influence.
The question is rhetorical. Obviously, it's the influence of the Russian Federation and China. And both of these countries are listed in the US as strategic adversaries. So Trump's threats today sound like an old joke where one person says, "Today I cheated the conductor. He paid but didn't go."
Someone please remind Donald Trump that the United States founded NATO and is the initiator and architect of this alliance. The supreme allied commander in Europe is always an American general. Essentially, NATO is an American collective security system that allies have joined.
At the same time, most analysts believe that Trump simply wants to draw NATO allies into a war in the Middle East. And if that happens, Ukraine could become one of the main beneficiaries, because the European Union will have a solid argument against Putin.
If the Americans want the Europeans to help in the Strait of Hormuz, then why shouldn't the Americans help in Europe regarding Russia? Because these are links. Both Russia and Iran are links in the same chain. So it's logical here.
But if we assume that the US president is determined and actually leaves the alliance, it opens up many new scenarios. The main one being that Europe will decisively and much faster take charge of its own security. And here too, it won't happen without Ukraine.
If you think about your security, then of course there can be no European security without Ukraine. This clearly brings to the forefront the question of involving Ukraine in these new security structures within Europe, or even within NATO. There could be some greater separation of European countries.
However, returning to reality, a US withdrawal from NATO is highly unlikely, analysts say. The US Congress and the Pentagon stated there are no discussions about a US withdrawal from NATO, while the alliance itself considers the White House chief's threats to break ties with the bloc a bluff. And legally, it's practically impossible to carry out.
Trump won't be able to withdraw the US from NATO. For that, he needs congressional approval. In December 2023, specifically for Trump, Congress passed an amendment prohibiting the president from unilaterally withdrawing the US from the alliance. The Senate will never find 60 votes for this, even if all the Republicans vote in favor. And among Republicans, there are plenty of Euro-Atlanticists like Mitch McConnell who would rather die than vote for such a thing.
And now is the time to recall Trump's favorite analogy. It seems that on the issue of leaving NATO, he doesn't just lack trump cards, he doesn't even have a pair of sixes.
Pashinyan, right in the Kremlin, looking Putin in the eye, began to say that in Armenia, unlike the Russian Federation, democracy exists. A harsh humiliation of Putin in the Kremlin. How did it happen? Details to follow. Two friends met in the Kremlin, or rather, two former friends who once shared a close bond met again in Moscow. Pashinyan came to Moscow to resolve important issues and even managed to troll Putin a bit.
I think the main interested party here is, of course, the Kremlin. Why Pashinyan can't refuse is also clear. Armenia is geographically situated such that it certainly needs good relations with Russia. Another thing is that the Armenian-Azerbaijani war and the non-interference of Russia in this story showed that today Putin is capable of nothing, and as an ally, he is absolutely zero.
Of course, at the center of attention are the upcoming parliamentary elections in Armenia, which interest the Russian dictator quite a bit.
There are many political forces that are pro-Russian. Of course, I'll tell you quite frankly, we really wanted all these political parties, the politicians, to be able to take part in this internal political work during the elections.
Does Putin really harbor the last hopes of gaining control over the country?
Putin is trying his best to influence all the elections he can influence, and he influences them in well-known ways.
But even in this case, Pashinyan gave a tough answer to the dictator and destroyed his rosy dreams.
He says that it's not really that Armenian passports are specifically needed, it's just, no. He says more subtly that you're pushing people with Russian passports on us, that only people with one citizenship can be elected here. And goodbye.
Although, of course, strangely enough, any interference in Armenia's elections is denied in the Kremlin itself.
Look, European representatives, they see Moscow's interference in everything, everywhere and in everything.
And what about discussing enemies? Putin is effectively warning the course towards the EU could cost Yerevan too much, from cheap gas to political pressure.
We understand that any country seeks, well, maximum benefits from cooperation with third countries. But it should be obvious, it should be fair in advance, as they say, stated on the shore. Being in a customs union with the European Union and with the EU is impossible. It's simply impossible.
But it seems that's when the Prime Minister stood up to Putin, and within the walls of the Kremlin told him where to go.
As long as there is an opportunity to combine these agendas, we will combine them. And when the processes develop to the point where it will be necessary to take any decision, I am confident that citizens of the Republic of Armenia will make this decision.
It seems Putin is losing an ally and a member of his Eurasian Economic Union who doesn't even deny that he might change course toward Western countries.
What's the appeal of an alliance with Putin anyway? The only thing Putin speaks directly about is that we have lower gas prices. And Pashinyan thinks to himself, tomorrow they'll bomb everything for you and you won't have any gas left either, and so on. It's clear that, of course, from the perspective of strategic outlook, rapprochement with the European Union is much more interesting.
Freedom, independence, and democracy are words that make Putin's eyes pop out of his head. But against the backdrop of constant internet outages in Russia.
This is all for your safety. You should switch to Max and V-Contacte.
Fuck you and your Max and your V-Contacte. Pashinyan decided to boldly needle the Kremlin master with words that trigger him and reminded him of the charms of Putinism.
There are citizens who genuinely believe that there is simply too much democracy in Armenia, but for us, this is truly a matter of principle. Our social networks, for example, are 100% completely free. There are absolutely no restrictions at all.
The final rift between the countries occurred in 2022, when hostilities broke out on the border of Armenia and Azerbaijan, with clashes already taking place on the territory of Armenia itself. However, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which includes the Russian Federation, never intervened.
We are currently not participating in the work of the CSTO at this time. And there is a straightforward reason for this. We still cannot explain to our people, to our citizens, why the CSTO did not react. And indeed, it did not respond.
Meanwhile, in the center of Moscow, rallies were held against the Prime Minister. Is it a performance? He promised the people peace. Such bold answers from the Armenian Prime Minister suggest that the country no longer needs Russia's help and Putin's so-called support.
Putin spends so much energy on the war with Ukraine that he simply has no energy left for anything else. And so, when those who used to be allies, partners, whatever you want to call Putin's, they have problems and Putin is unable to help anyone at all. So as a result, his allies gradually fall away, each with their own varying degrees of activity and involvement.
And the most surprising thing is that we are seeing this dialogue. The Kremlin actually brought into the public sphere a conversation that hardly adds points to Putin. Is it really that bad with allies that even such moments are being aired? And it seems the circle of friends around him is getting narrower. That's all for now. I know many of you are watching from outside Ukraine. Tell us in the comments where you're from. And do many of your fellow citizens support the Ukrainian people in our righteous struggle against the occupiers? Also, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.